Welcome back to Season 8 of the Red Letter Disciple. I am Zach Zender, and my co-host and friend, Pastor Chris Johnson, will be joining us here in just a minute, and we are excited to get another season of podcasts going. Today's episode 88 is with a special friend, Tim Alman. Tim is a pastor, third-generation LCMS pastor, who's a great friend and accountability partner for me. And over the years, we've had that relationship. But he's going to talk today about how we can have healthy disagreements in church leadership and what the future of the denomination that we are in, the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod, is, what has to change, and how do we develop the next group of leaders and pastors so that we can continue this great denomination we are in. So it's going to be an awesome conversation, very denomination-centric to get things kicking off in Season 8. Hey, today's episode is brought to you by our partner, Children's Hope Chest. This ministry is close to my heart and my family's heart. We have had the pastor to travel with them to Uganda and see their work in person. And right now, our family sponsors, each one of us sponsors a child in a village in Los Amates, Guatemala, as we work with our church to do that. An incredible, powerful organization, so much so, we love them so much that we have teamed up. That's right, Hope Chest and Red Letter Living have teamed up for an epic Pastor's Vision trip, March 24 to 29. So that's right, it's coming up in just under 2 minutes. So there isn't a lot of time left to get in and just a few spots left. So here's what we want. Pastors, we want you and your spouse or you and your associate to join us on this powerful trip. Not only will we be going to Guatemala together and see kind of their model in action, we'll have some evangelism opportunities, home visits, and we'll connect with children at Hope Chest. But every day I'll be leading some devotions, kind of guiding you through some Red Letter Challenge targets and empowering you to bring the teachings of Jesus with you into your everyday life. And so if you are interested in this trip, I'd love for you to go to redletterchallenge.com/hopechest. redletterchallenge.com/hopechest. We're going to have a great time together. We're going to have all that fun on the mission field. And then the final day, because I love golf and my wife loves coffee, we're going to host a cool kind of one-day excursion at the end where anybody wants to golf with me can come play golf. Or if you'd rather just go on a coffee farm tour and trip and do that with Allison, who's the better of us two, then you can do that with her. So it's going to be really fun. Again, not much time left to register. Only a few spots left. redletterchallenge.com/hopechest. Here we go, Season 8. We're about to get started. And so if you haven't yet, I'd love for you to subscribe or follow on whatever platform. And if you would, send a quick rating or review. Maybe write a quick review. We love hearing those and how we can serve you best. So without further ado, let's get to Season 8, Episode 1 with Tim Alman. Let's do this. Well, ladies and gentlemen, disciples of all ages, here we go. It's another season of Red Letter Disciple, kicking off this season with Tim Alman. Tim
brought to you by Fiji.
He's a third-generation LCMS pastor at Christ's Greenfield Lutheran Church in beautiful Gilbert, Arizona.
Have you been there?
I have. It's awesome.
Really?
Yeah, it's next level.
Okay.
It's an amazing place. Super fast growing as well. Tim is passionate about helping the church become filled with great leaders and disciples. He runs the Unite Leadership Collective. He also hosts the Lead Time podcast. He's really smart. He got his doctorate not long ago. That's pretty cool. He's married to an amazing woman, Alexa. They got 3 kids. He's like a 1 handicap on the golf course, which I'm really jealous of. And he's my accountability partner for more than 5 years now.
When he says his wife's name, does the machines go crazy all over?
Let's find out. Timmy Alman, welcome to the Red Letter Disciple. And what did happen when Alexa came onto the scene with your wife, Alexa?
Yeah, she was really frustrated. She had such a unique name for like her whole life. And then every new person that she hung out with, they're like, hi, Alexa, hi, Alexa. And it was really, really annoying to her, to be quite frank. But I'm married, just like you did, ZZ. I'm married way up with my wife. She puts up with me.
Yeah.
And this is going to be fun today.
And I bet she hears those same jokes over and over about Alexa, and trying to get, and that reminds me, what joke, I've got one in my head. Okay. Is there a joke that people give to you as a pastor that they think you've never heard before, that they think is hilarious, that you're like, I'm totally over that? And I've heard that
there
before.
is a number, there's a number one answer to this.
I have a number one answer. Do you have one, TA? I'm just wondering off the cuff.
Yes.
Well, it's just, you shake so many hands on a Sunday, right? People are coming through the line, and I got frostbite when I was a kid and have really bad circulation. So it's like 40 degrees here and my hands get white and stuff like that. So people are coming out in the winter here in Arizona and they shake my hand and they go, oh, cold hands, warm heart. I've heard that. And I'm like, oh my gosh, my heart is not that warm toward you right now, to be honest, because I just hear your hands are so freaking cold. And so I got to tell people,
yeah.
I got frostbite as a kid and blah, blah, blah. So that's the little passing through thing I always know, because my hands are ridiculously cold right now. And that's why I live in Arizona. So yeah, what do you guys got?
Yeah. Well, yeah, what do you?
Definitely the number one.
I bet it's the same.
Is well, you only work one day a week.
That's the one I'm
you
thinking.
only work one day a week.
And also the one we get, actually, as this podcast is going out, every year, I think for the last 5 years, I get some sort of meme or GIF about the Super Bowl.
It's GIF.
It's GIF.
It's
but
GIF.
about the Super Bowl of, we should pour water on a pat.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean? It's whatever that GIF. Anyway.
It's GIF.
GIF.
Anyway. No, what is it? What do you call it? Do you call it GIF like the peanut butter? No,
it's a GIF.
Thank you,
Zach. Come on, Jiffy is peanut butter.
Thank you.
Wow.
Right. I'm so hungry right now. Give me a GIF and jelly sandwich. No.
Exactly.
Come on, that's ridiculous.
Well, what we say
Let's
about
go to our producer. What do you call it?
I think it's Jeff. Sorry.
What?
A GIF? It's a G.
That's because her name is Jocelyn. She can't pronounce anything.
No, it's because if you are the one that invented it and own it, you get to determine what it's.
Oh,
how
you
it's
own
pronounced.
it? You own it?
No, the person who invented it calls it GIF.
No. Are you serious?
If we want to go biblical on this, God is the one that gets to dictate our lives and tell us how to live.
But Adam,
because He owns us.
Adam named the animals. It wasn't like God named. Never mind.
Okay. That's all we wanted, Tim. Thanks,
Thank
man.
you so much
Appreciate
for
it.
joining us.
It's been fun. Thanks for that.
Thank you.
We solved a lot of problems today.
Shit.
No, you and I, we go way back, and great friend, accountability partner, and I love and support the work that you're doing. And so I really wanted to have you on the podcast. Those that listen to the Red Letter Disciple, like part of my strategy from the beginning has not been to be too, let's call it, denomination centric with, who our guests are. And part of my world in Red Letter living is I get to be in great conversations with voices from many different denominations. And that was part of my heart, was I want to actually bring those voices onto the Red Letter Disciple, knowing that I have a largely Lutheran Church Missouri Synod audience because that's my denomination. And I really wanted to bring them new voices that can kind of help them think about things in a different way. But there are times when my heart really does stir for our denomination. And so today's conversation is probably going to be very LCMS focused. I think there'll be obviously some points for anybody listening they're going to grab from it. But I wanted to bring you on because I believe you are one of the best movers and shakers. And I know we're wired in a similar way in what we think and dream about the LCMS. Because I want to talk about where we're at in the LCMS and why you're kind of taking on some topics that you are. And so I just want to jump right in. Your Lead Time podcast, I think, is amazing, and it's creating quite a stir in our denomination, the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod. And so why did you decide that's what I want to do? I want to create some controversy or talk about controversy. Tell me more behind the why.
And also, that a boy.
Oh, Chris, thanks. So it started out like I want to talk culture, system, structure, leadership, discipleship, the overlap of that. Got, 4 years ago now. It took me like 8 years to get my doctorate, but I finally got across the finish line. And
nice.
the thesis, it was like 4 years in thesis mode. And so I wanted to talk about some of that. I guess that's probably where it kind of evolved. I started to see some trends in the wider pastorate and the wider American Christian church, and then see how those trends are even amplified, doubled down on in terms of passive behaviors amongst especially pastors, and how this is going back to the Harrison behavioral assessment tool, not President Matthew Harrison, but Harrison it's a secular tool that analyzes behaviors of leaders, and saw that we were passively imbalanced as a pastorate. And when challenged, we don't handle anxiety very well, and we respond in very passive-aggressive, dysfunctional ways. We don't bring the challenge to the person. We label the person, and we become even more tribal. And that can happen at the local level. Obviously, church is super super messy. But then over time, it kind of evolved into, oh my goodness, there's a whole bunch of conversations that are not healthy that are happening behind closed doors, and people are starting to label one another as the world is kind of spinning out of control in maybe a secular post-denomination, this kind of grab toward making ourselves look as self-righteous as we possibly can based on things like worship and what kind of person you associate with and kind of these external rituals. I just saw that kind of doubling down more and more. Couple that with two major, so I've done some speaking on this recently. If you want to get the leadership right now in the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod, I guess, frustrated. We talk about the prior approval, who's on what list for what leadership role in our Concordias. And I don't know a whole lot about that. Like, that's beyond my pay grade to a degree, but I hear from a lot of people who are frustrated. They ask for certain leaders' names to be on lists, and they're told by those that are in the highest levels of leadership in Synod that they can't be on a list with no explanation given. So the prior approval process, there's frustration in the system of the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod. And then the formation, which is really my heart. How are we raising up leaders? Do we have the quality and quantity of leaders that we need at every level in the local church? And we've outsourced leadership development to our institutions. And I think our local churches, especially those like ours that have big dream to start new ministry, to reach new people with the gospel, we need to be at that table. And we're not necessarily at that table right now in the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod. So those two topics have kind of evolved. There's Concordias that are closing. So just ends up being a place where if you've got a struggle, and you want to talk about it in the hopes of letting other people hear your perspective and talk about it, the Lead Time podcast has evolved toward that end. And I got to say, to close here, I want to talk to people that I disagree with, or they disagree. I may not even know what the disagreement is, or they got something that they've got a caricature they've developed about me or a large church pastor or whatever. Like, come on and let's model healthy discourse, disagreeing agreeably. So that's the why.
I love that. That is fantastic. And especially Zach and I were just on the drive home after doing 5 podcasts yesterday. We're still talking about church, specifically the LCMS. And in his context, they're a big church like you guys, and they have this huge dream to plant 10 churches, satellite churches around Omaha, which is inspiring. But the bottom line, and what we were bemoaning yesterday, was that the pool is just not deep. Like, we just tried to call a pastor. It took 9 months to get one, and the system that we have right now is so flawed, in my opinion. We have SMP, specific ministry pastor. We have alternative routes, but they're frowned upon too. And so I don't know. I don't know how we can get there already at a negative for workers and say that the only route is through traditional means. I understand that is a good route, but is it the exclusive route? I don't think so.
Yeah, and Tim and I both went through the traditional route, and Chris, you've been through you're an SMP guy.
I have an asterisk next to my name.
Well, that's what it feels like, sadly.
Yes, I can't vote. I can't do all the things that you guys can do, and when I get around confessional guys, a lot of times, it's kind of seen as like they joke about it. Like,
So Tim, what does it look like then to have, because I heard a lot in there that kind of the initial reason for doing this is because we don't necessarily handle conflict well. Like, if the truth is, if you're doing anything of importance, you're going to run into conflict. You have to have conflict.
Yes.
Or it's like not worth it in the end. And so I'd want to kind of know from you, especially with studying the Harrison behavioral stuff and all the conversations you've had, like, what does it look like to have a healthy disagreement today? What can we do to disagree well with one another, even if it doesn't mean we change our opinions necessarily?
Yeah.
But how do you navigate how to have healthy disagreement?
Yeah, no, that's good. So two books that are constantly books I want to remember and integrate into life and leadership is Leadership and Self-Deception by the Arbinger Group. It's a classic, came out about 20 years ago. You can find a newer edition. It uses this, it's not a Christian book, but definitely a Christian concept, because confession and absolution is grounded into every human being. We're a confessing people. Chris, you kind of brought up, I'm a confessing Christian. Yeah. I'm a confessing Lutheran, but I know when you use that term, what you mean. But nonetheless, I'm in the analogy in leadership and self-deception, I am always the problem. Mm-hmm. Either my sin of commission or my sin of omission. I'm always a problem in that I've labeled someone else. I'm in the box. This is the metaphor that they use. I'm in the box toward you when I say, man, and I'm going to use Chris. Mm-hmm. Chris's red jacket is like, I am so ticked at Chris's red jacket. Look at that. Look at how gaudy that guy is. I mean, this is insane. He's got such attitude. He really thinks he's a big deal, doesn't he? When we blame other people.
You were honestly, that sounds spot on with, like, I've thought those same things.
I know you have. So we got to confess. We've thought that.
I bring Chris on because we disagree, and I just want that. Anyway, keep going.
No, but I'm in the box when I blame other people, when I make other people the problem. Mm-hmm. I'm in the box. I get out of the box when I confess I have a problem, and it's me. Not only the things that I've done. I've been on a kick recently on sins of omission. There is no end to the sins of omission. The things I could have said, the places I could have gone, the courageous conversations I could have had, right? So I just think we need to confess our sin more to one another. Sins of commission, thinking, saying, what gets thrown around is the eighth commandment, right? And we're sinning against our brother. But how often are we talking a lot about my own sin, my own struggle? And I would say in a real personal way. So I'll use an example, like President Tom Egger. He's a president at Concordia Seminary in St. Louis. I know Tom. Tom and I have talked. I don't know Tom deeply. I pray for Tom. I care for him. And I know in the conversation that we're having around formation, he has a lot of competing interests. Yeah. There are a lot of stakeholders in this thing. There are people whose jobs could be on the line if he even has a conversation with me and explores alternative means toward. So I'm compassionate and sympathetic toward that. It doesn't change the reality that we've got some opportunities for growth, but I know he's in a very, very hard spot. President Harris in a very, very hard spot. You've got competing interests coming at you all the time, because I live like that. People label me in the local church. You don't have time for me or whatever. So I have to confess, I need to be in a relationship with you. And I just think generally we're systemically in the box toward one another, not confessing, and developing an ever tightening box to become ever more tribal in the Missouri Synod. And it's really not helpful. So that's the first book. And then another book is called Difficult Conversations. And it talks about contribution. I always have to get toward my contribution toward whatever it is. And maybe my contribution's 10% of the problem, but the quicker I get to contribution toward the dysfunction in our relationship, the quicker. So I've just seen that, Zach, over time. And I just don't think it's very, very helpful for us in the LCMS. And I say this all the time. I mean, our theology is so good, right? Yeah. The reason I care is because we're in a family. Like our law gospel distinctions, attention-filled theology points that we talk about in the Missouri Synod are so good. I just don't know that we're living out like the base. If you can't be in a relationship with someone that you disagree with, it's all gone. That's the heart of unity, right? And let's get to Jesus real quick. We got to go to Jesus. Like, Jesus was the master at being around people, speaking hard words of challenge, but somehow it's not just what Jesus said, but it's how he said it. Somehow it drew them closer. I was reflecting on Peter's denial recently. In Luke's gospel, it talks about when Peter denies him, Jesus looks at him. Do you remember that? It says, actually, Jesus looked at him in the courtyard. What was that look like? I don't think, because I know the heart of Jesus, it wasn't like, chump, you're the worst. You're the worst, Peter. I think it was a look of love.
Yeah.
And then when Jesus comes to restore him, breakfast on the beach, do you love me? Do you love me? Do you love me? It's all love. And then he calls us up and out, go feed my sheep, give your life away. So I pray we can just embrace the difficult conversations that Jesus always had, drawing closer to one another rather than further away. I don't know if I'm answering your question, but that's the best I got.
I like your heart behind all this. And I'm just wondering, and I'm going to throw it to Zach after this. Are you concerned about going against the grain, about putting out a podcast that could ruffle the feathers of some people that are, like you said, in higher positions of power in the denomination?
I am not concerned because I believe the Holy Spirit wants to bring unity, wants
Awesome.
to bring peace, the fruit of the Spirit. I just want to live in the fruit of the Spirit: love, joy, peace, patience, joy. I think joy can unite us. And if we actually get to know one another, I've asked those two brothers that I mentioned just now, because it's not all like this sounds like it's super political. Like I actually want to get to know them and hear their perspective and what like juices President Harrison up. I think you can villainize certain leaders, and I think he's definitely not a villain. He's in a tough spot. I pray for him and all leaders that are in. So it's never about the person. So since it's more the system, I'm not really personally. And if people wanted to, bring whatever to me, it's okay. Like I'm loved by Jesus and my family and this faith community. I think local pastors maybe have to be a slightly more bold in courageous conversations like this, because to expect people who are in our institutions and in the system of Synod to have those conversations is probably more difficult for them in their context. So I'm just one pastor in a local. We got big mission, and we hit roadblocks synodically, and let's work it out together, right?
Yep.
So no, I'm not really worried.
Okay.
That's great. And I know your personality enough to know we're similarly wired. Enneagram 8 challengers, we don't, there's concern, but we live with a deeper, higher calling. And I know you have a kind of a high challenge culture. Like that's a big deal for you, is to bring a high challenge, to people, and because you want the best out of them and you want them to be great leaders and great disciples. And so, talk to me a little bit about how you create that challenge culture, maybe locally at your context, but then also in the denomination.
I mean, we just talk about it all the time. It's probably from a value. We do hard things here, right? We start new things. This is heavy risk. I mean, I teach on the parable of the talents a lot. To bury the talent, like the master says, we're wicked when we're moving like this, and this is cliche, but it just is what it is. Hard stuff, change is going to lead toward people putting the worst construction on respective leaders who are trying different things. We're not communicating as well as we could and should. And so, I mean, I literally just got done this morning with a 15-minute devotion, all staff devotion, talking about leadership and self-deception and being in and out of the box. That's why that was just top of mind. Like it is a core value for us that we do and say hard things here, but it's coupled with love. I was thinking 1 Peter chapter 4, I think it's verse 8. Love, let us not stop loving one another, for love covers over a multitude of sins. And unfortunately, we've equated love in our culture to always affirming me. The Lord disciplines those whom he loves. And so leaders have to develop deep relationships with care. We're meeting with people consistently, right? This is a shout out for direct reports. Like if you're not meeting with your team individually every single week, that's like gold. That 30 minutes or an hour check-in. How are you? Heart, body, mind, spirit. How are your rhythms? Time with the Lord. How's your family? I care for you more than just a cog in the machine of this thing. And then 3, how you doing on your goals? And how can I help? How can I support you? That's what my weekly accountability conversations kind of look like. So I don't know if I'm answering your question. It's just baked into our culture, right?
Yeah, Tim, it feels easier. And I've often, if I'm honest, wondered, like all the stuff you're talking about and the challenges you're bringing up, it feels easier to just say, hey, we had a good run, but let's part ways. And so I was asked not long ago on a pretty popular podcast platform, like, why are you still in a mainline denomination? And so I'd love to just kind of ask you that, because if I'm real with you, it feels easier, and it probably would be easier to just say we had a good run, but we're gonna take our ball over here. So what, in all these conversations, like what really drives you to stay inside the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod and to fight?
So I'm more concerned with the amygdala, the corporate amygdala hijack of not fighting but fleeing. I'm kind of in a middle position, and there are, because of the dysfunction, there are people that talk to me and say, "Hey, we got to have a exit strategy," and I'm just no, I don't like that. I don't like that at all. You don't leave your family. That feels like divorce. It feels like division. It feels like given into what Satan would love. He would love for a larger, influential, confessional Lutheran church like the Missouri Synod to just splinter. Like, this is a pivotal time. If I had a vision of like, ooh, we got to do a new thing, it doesn't mean we can't do a new thing within an old thing, which is what we're trying to do in innovation. That's just the way it goes. That's how organizations evolve over time. But I have, Chris, you brought up, are you worried? Like, I'm more worried about the system responding in a really negative, fleeing direction, rather than, because that would leave collateral damage, man. You look at the ELCA and the Evangelical Lutheran Church of America, the collateral damage because of the leadership dysfunction is kind of wild. I think the LCMS has reacted to the dysfunction, not only of the ELCA, but of Seminex. We still have wounds. And so we just need to stay together and talk about the wounds, because what we're talking about right here is not theology. There may be some theological differences around communion or women or worship or stuff like that, right? But like, most of it is just a struggle with being with those people who are different in different contexts right now, because it's not theology. We got some areas, but we need to keep talking. But we are not falling off on the liberal side in the LCMS at all. And so I think that's my biggest concern is I do not want to do anything that would say lead a charge of people that are looking to just get out. That would be easier, but that's not the way of Jesus. You don't leave your family.
That's good. I responded with, because these are my guys, and there's a lot of great people that I love that I get to do life with. And at the end of the day, I said, I do love the theology, that we have. And I was able to share actually Lutheran theology on this pretty well-known podcast, more than 700 episodes. They'd never had anyone talk about infant baptism and why, churches believe that. And I've had so many people, both in the Lutheran faith, but outside of that too, to just say it was really awesome to hear a different view represented, that honestly a large percentage of people still believe, but it's not public, if you will, on a lot of platforms that are outside our denomination. So, there's so much good. And, I think about that quite a bit of what are we doing together, and how can we do this more effectively? And is there ever a day when it would be more effective when we're not together? But I don't want to do that. But I also know it's not the same today as it was you're third generation, I'm fourth generation. And so like, there's some deep roots that we've put into this, and we want to see it get better. And it's really frustrating when we have disagreements and when we can't move the ball forward. And so from your perspective, like, I heard you talk earlier about prior approval and formation, and maybe that's a couple of them, but what are like the top, 3 things that if we're going to change where we are and really move forward well together, that we need to kind of come together and work on? Because what I don't want to do, I don't want to flee. I don't want an exit strategy. Like, that's not our goal. But at the same time, I have to refuse to accept our current reality and just say that we're going to put our feet down and do more of the same and not make any changes at all, which again is not totally fair to say that that's what we do. But I would say that is it. We definitely lean on that side of things as a denomination. And like, the right answer can't be flee and figure this out on your, as 2 separate entities. And I think the right answer can't be put our feet in the ground and do everything exactly the same and just accept a rapid decline, because I think we're far closer to death than we are to life if we keep on this. So long dialogue there, but what are a few of the things with that in the background that like we really need to rally together and figure out something here so that the future of the LCMS is one together and is one of not declining but growing?
Yeah, I think it's working in every specific topic toward places of agreement, and starting there, right? We took the same confession, like just going down the whole line. I don't need to do it right now, but let's take like worship, for instance, right? That for those that have a narrowing view of the church, this is not bad. It's just I think we're imbalanced in this direction. A defensive, purity focused, protective perspective. And because the way God made me, and in our context, it's a widening move, and there's two different sides. We need both sides, the movement side, and you could say the mission side, and hey, we cannot compromise on our clear confession of who Jesus is, the means of grace, etc. Right? So worship ends up on the narrowing side, the kind of purity focused, and I hate using sides, but I think that's just kind of how we're going to identify ourselves solely around worship. I, as one who has both a very high church and I don't like high and low because it's not low church, but a modern worship expression. I think we need to come to some sort of agreement on, this is going to sound kind of silly, but the order, the structure of our gatherings. Because I used to, as a younger leader, think like, well, it doesn't, I want to go to this church and I want to go 5 and 15 and I want to know kind of what it is that I'm going to get. I want to be able to go to almost any church and have a similar experience. Well, it's kind of silly because every church is in different contexts, has their own kind of rituals, etc. But can we come to some sort of agreement in the early church, not the early church first, second century, but the early church in the US, in the LCMS, we had agreement. And it actually was a much wider agreement. There's a lot of historians, it's the pioneer days of the LCMS. It's the Wild West. We're getting German pastors who are coming over. We're trying to figure out our kind of institutions, the way we're going to raise up more leaders. It was like, we're going to get together. There's going to be a confession, absolution time, hearing of the word, prayer, that singing, that's going to kind of be it. Could we come to some sort of agreement, whether you have modern worship or not, on what it is? And I mean, I had a group when I came here 12 years ago. This is going to sound like I'm super fuddy-duddy, stick in the mud, like not with the times, but we were trending in our contemporary worship toward like a non-denom expression. Like it was all singing and, and then we're preaching for maybe 45 minutes, right? Because that's what the non-denoms do, and then and whatnot. So singing and preaching. I was like, no. We're gonna do like the divine service. It's gonna look and feel a little bit different. But could we come to some sort of agreement on that? But it's wide enough for people to feel like, okay, I can still have my expression. I'll just throw some. I think we should have invocation. I think inviting God to remember our baptism is great. I think confession absolution is necessary for us. How it gets, like, that's different for us. Obviously, the Lord's table needs to be consistent. Do this often. Time in the Word, time in prayer, Lord's Prayer, Apostles' Creed, Nicene Creed. I think we're confessing people. I think the creed matters, and then we're sent with the blessing of God. Like, that's a rough overview of something I think we could agree on the worship side. So I use that as one example to say, and you can go to women in leadership and things like, we just need to come to some point of agreement. And then the way I trust you, and then the way that gets exercised in your context is going to look a little bit different. And if I see something, if I'm trolling online, I'm going to have a conversation with you. I know you. I want to put the best construction on why you're making that decision. But we really, really are struggling right now in contextual hospitality in the LCMS. Big time. And I'm just praying for more of that. I'm answering your question. So I think it's working from a point of agreement and then working toward places of distinction in our various contexts.
And I think, what I'm hearing you say is working towards a point of agreement, but also having a broader, wider understanding of agreement than is just like one option.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. And so I think that's really great. And I think the piece that I want to hit on a little bit that I find really hard, is I feel like we're one of, especially with pastoral formation, one of the most rigid, antiquated models that we have in our nation. And so there's only a couple of ways to do it. They're not cheap. They're heavy burden on the person going through, time and sometimes financially as well. And then after we say all of that and put them through our system, we actually don't end up trusting a lot of the ones that we've sent through this rigid, antiquated system. And so to me, I'm finding that to be a disconnect of like, if you want to go rigid and antiquated, like at least trust your people then. Like, I feel like we've got like a rigid, antiquated system, and we're not looking at taking new opportunities despite the world changing a lot in the last quarter of a century. And at the same time, we're not even trusting our own people. Like, and then we won't have healthy conversation around it. And I'm probably just, saying all the stuff that you do on your podcast.
The quickest way to kill any organization is to go high control, low trust. And that's the system that we're a part of right now. So we got work to do.
Yeah.
Chris?
So agreement, but wider agreement, perhaps in trusting our people to get it done. One of the things I love about you too, that I think could be the determining factor on the future of the LCMS or not, is pastoral formation, leaders.
Mhm.
And right now we are producing, I believe, record lows, and I believe it's getting lower and lower. It's getting harder and harder and harder for churches to call pastors.
You've got pastors out there pastoring multiple churches.
We see that in our Nebraska district. We're now getting conversations from several churches of, we won't be able to find a pastor when our pastor leaves. Is there some way we can merge together so that we can still be a church? And like, those are hard conversations. And I think we're going to have far, far more of those. And so what would you speak, like you started the Unite Leadership Collective to raise leaders, but what can we do on the pastoral formation side to offer should we offer something else? Can we use this thing called the internet to help?
What's that?
Maybe lower cost, make things more localized, regionalized. Like, what does that look like from your perspective?
Well, I think it's local churches kindly but clearly saying we need to take this into our backyard. We need to do things different, and we need to run tests in formation. There's nowhere, because I've asked for this for quite a while now. I'd love to have a theological, dialogue around the topic of formation from a biblical and Lutheran confessional perspective that says residential is the only way. I've talked to President Egger, and he's very much into residential as the best way, maybe not the only way, but the best way. And he has a strong desire for more general ordination pastors. And if you're outside the LCMS, that simply means guys that can go and serve in different contexts. But I think where we struggle is we fail to see that the seminary and St. Louis or Fort Wayne is a respective context. Like, you're being formed in a community. Mm-hmm. And so if you're still going to have to learn and adapt into a different context when you take a call, right? So if you raise up leaders like we're doing locally, could they be generally rostered and have to adapt into another context, a general ordination pastor? Absolutely. Like, I think that's one of the biggest things. People look at some of the leaders we're raising up right now, and they're like, oh, that's just a pastor in our circuit actually just said this. I always thought you were just raising up pastors for your church, not for my church. And he goes, I was sorry that I didn't know that some of the guys and gals in different leadership positions could be sent. It's like, that's the entire purpose of the thing, to send out leaders into the fields of ripen of the harvest, So yeah, we're so isolated, and we don't think like Jesus and the Holy Spirit thinks of our sending God, right? So local churches just have to get at the table more and take responsibility, run tests, recognize that adoption of said tests is going to be a long journey. We're not ordaining any of our students. They're serving under supervision. All of them, all but one, are all co-vocational. They have jobs out in the marketplace. And the proof is in the pudding. I mean, they're fantastic. And every church, like, find your elders, get in touch with us at Unite Leadership. And we got ways that we can give them good Lutheran theological formation. But the character is so, like, these are men and women, but not for ordination, right? These are men and women who have been vetted by the church and the Holy Spirit over time. They're there, but we just don't have a vision nor the system to identify how we can train them in context. I mean, our Concordias, both of our seminaries, are two of the only institutions, and it's like, on one hand, someone can challenge me on this, on one hand, institutions the size of our seminaries that don't offer an online MDiv.
Yep.
I mean, it's just bonkers why we wouldn't. And as I say, and for those that listen to me go off on this topic all the time, I just kind of, I lament that I even have to say this, but we have different models of ground game increasing while innovation using something called the intranet comes out. It's called GCU. It's called GCU right now, just blowing up in my backyard. How did that happen? It was innovation, getting education to people in real time, letting them do independent adult style learning, and it grew the brand. And now they're busting at the seams, man. 20-some thousand on campus students, residential students. So if we have a conversation around limits for online, you know, how long you've been in the church, what age and stage are you? I think that's definitely fair. I believe that the on-campus game, residential game, grows exponentially. It's not an either or, it's a both and conversation. But right now it's kind of like, you remember, I don't say this like 13, 14-year-olds should watch this movie, but Something About Mary. Zach, remember Something About Mary?
Yeah.
Right. And they're in the car, and the guy says, hey, I'm going to put this thing together called like 8-minute abs. 8-minute abs. Right. And then the guy goes, well, what happens if someone else comes with 7-minute abs? No, man, 8 is the key number. I feel like that's the way we're talking about this. No, it's 8-minute abs. It's residential only, you know, that kind of thing. So it's just, I think the Holy Spirit is like, what are we doing? Like, the fields are ripe unto the harvest. Like I gave you guys the game plan. Jesus modeled the game plan. It was about apprenticeship, discipleship, and release, all for the sake of the local level. Was it out of control? Was it reactive? 100%. That's why Paul wrote his letters, right? I mean, he's reacting to what the Holy Spirit is already doing in the local church. But it's like, we're not reading I don't know if we're reading the Bible, man, because it's 2 Timothy 2:2. I mean, Paul is saying, find others who can teach. That's it. Men of high character, find them who can teach, raise them up to find others who can teach, and off we go. Mm-hmm. We didn't have institutional residential. You put a quarter in me, I get going on this. We didn't have the model until the monastic movement in the 7th and 8th century. Like, and the church thrived. So come on, are we trusting the Holy Spirit first and foremost? I think we bring charges right now. We'd bring charges against the way Jesus did it, the way the Apostle Paul did it. Like, if you want to go down that legalistic, pharisaical path and bring something at me like we shouldn't be raising up local leaders, bring it, because we're going to talk about Jesus. We're going to talk about the early church, and I'm going to be accountable. Like, there's accountability. I'm going to be accountable. Did you stay safe to please men, or didn't you recognize you had a higher accountability? And I'm going to, you know, who knows how long I live, but when I see the Lord, I want to be able to say I did everything I possibly could with your help to reach people with the gospel.
Man, that should be a reel right there. That was fantastic.
There you go. Cut.
Real
cut
quick.
The reel. Yeah.
Cut the reel. I love your passion. I love your heart toward all this. As someone who went through the alternative route, it took 4 years. Prior to that, I was part of the church for 15 years, being mentored by our former boss, Paul Hoyer, who's no longer with us. The district president came to me. He said, I think you should do this to be better equipped. I said no the first time. The second time he came back, because I was fighting it. And I said, yeah, this is something. And once a week, I would meet with the mentor, go over my lesson for 4 years. Like I did this. And now at the new church plant that I'm at, every week we have communion. Every week we have confession and absolution. So this idea that since my worship style is a little bit different, that I'm not confessional, I talk every week about how we're a sacramental church.
Amen.
We do the confessions every week. Like it's just I kind of like I get irritated when we go to these district meetings and some of the more conservative people, I guess, in terms of worship style, don't consider me a confessional Lutheran. Like that, and I guess that's me in the box, and I got to stop being that. But I'm like, dude, I'm doing everything that you're doing, with the exception is I have a drum set on my stage, or on my altar area.
And there's lower trust with you because you went through S&P.
100%.
And that's what.
And you wear jackets like that.
Yeah, and
what guy wears jackets like that? This is crazy, Chris.
And I remember
a jacket like that.
Yeah,
that's true. That's true.
Speak to what you guys are talking about. We sent 2 guys through S&P, and one of them did a study as he was going through S&P, and he found that Concordia Seminaries was one of 2 seminaries that did not offer an online Masters of Divinity, and a lot of these guys want that, and if they're younger and they're wanting to be a pastor with the Masters of Divinity, and we do not offer that in a convenient way. I'm talking Gen Z here, who are the next group of leaders going to be coming up. They're just going to go somewhere else where they can have that.
Absolutely.
And they'll have their convictions, and they may or may not be Lutheran as they get shaped and formed. But we're missing out when we don't get ahead of the game on this. And the example that you gave of Grand Canyon University, we had President Brian Mueller on last season, and we'll put the episode link in the show notes. And let's not forget that he went to Concordia University,
exactly,
and would love to help the Lutherans figure out.
Yes,
he's the premier expert in the world on online education, and he loves Lutheranism.
Yes,
and for whatever reason, our feet are stuck in the mud.
And the crazy thing is, some of the guys in my class wanted to lose the SMP title, so then they went back for another 4 years. Didn't get the MDiv, but have a certification as general pastor. You're talking a total of 8 years. Yeah. And it's not even the same.
And I know one of those that I'm close with that went through SMP and just for whatever reason had a really hard time passing the Greek and Hebrew qualifiers. And so it was years of trying to pass those 2 tests before he could get into the general pastoral certificate years more model.
So you're talking,
but he had everything else. He was already leading. He is already leading a church.
Right.
Everything else, and because he was a few points short on a Greek and Hebrew test, which honestly you can Google those things pretty easily today.
Yeah.
It's a control issue.
So
I think.
You brought up a movie. I'm going to bring up a movie. I'm going to bring up Tommy Boy. Tommy Boy, when they go, Tommy gets off the plane and he's got his garbage bag full of clothes or whatever. And David Spade goes, how was college? And anyway, the line was, a lot of people go to college for 8 years. Yeah, they're called lawyers. You go 4 years to college and then another 8 years. You're talking 12 years of education, not even saying that the mentorship that you have, it's not like you're doing this in a fishbowl. You're surrounded by people you trust and love. 12 years and to not even earn an MDiv is, as you said, ridiculous.
Yeah. TA, what's at stake if we don't make changes?
The judgment of God. That's law, by the way. But the parable of the talents, we are a high control, low trust. Right now, bury your talent. And I find that story quite fascinating, that parable. The first 2 guys, 5 and 2, right? They multiply it, they risk it. And I think because they knew the heart of the master would hold them accountable for sure. But the master, his ultimate disposition toward them was love. And so they could risk. The third guy says, I need you to be a hard man, so I didn't want to I think we need that word of law, like a sin of omission, not engaging this conversation with some sort of an open idea toward reaching more people with the gospel based on our amazing theology. The master comes back and calls that sin of omission wicked. He calls that servant, you're wicked.
Wicked and lazy.
Wicked and lazy, slothful. Yeah, exactly. So that's what I'm worried about for. I don't live with anxiety. I live with a lot of optimism for the church. I think this is a great day. I'll harness my President Dale Meyer from back in the day, right? It's a great day to be the church.
Yeah.
Anytime there's struggle and trial, it's a great time to be the church. If there's robust faith and trust in God and trust and care for one another, love God, love others. And so, but the word of law is for those who have been put in charge of whatever it is, whatever your realm of influence is, like there will be accountability toward how, and I take like my vows super seriously, right? You will be held to a higher account. And I want to be open. I want to be a part of something that's growing and reaching people with the gospel, because I didn't land this plane. I think there's revival. We don't talk about that, but Holy Spirit, like revival, especially in our younger generation, Bible sales being up. There's a whole bunch of number of things that are saying people are open towards spirituality. Are they going to find the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod, our context, as a hospitable, kind, charitable, mission forward, welcoming to all types of people community, our faith communities? I don't know if we got work to do there as a culture in the LCMS. But to do that work, this is why leadership development is huge. Like I can't do all that. Like as a local pastor, I need a lot of support. And so we just got a lot of learners and leaders who are helping with word and sacrament here. So that's my word of law, and hopefully gospel toward those who are in leadership.
Yeah, it's beautiful, man. I think we need to hear that. And, in the latest book we've been working on, I've just been more and more enthralled and reminded of how often God talked about heaven and hell and the kingdom, and that these things are real. And I think when we only keep our eyes on what's in front of us, we don't think about, judgment day, accountability. We don't think about the positive side of that, heaven being larger. That's our eternity, what worship will be like in a city where God is the light and there's no more darkness. And there's all these, so many times where Jesus talks about heavenly rewards. We don't really talk a lot about that. And so like the reality that this is coming, and we've got a short time-stamped period where we are here on this earth. And for us to be so combative and not trusting of one another, I think really does hurt the overall mission of what we're supposed to be doing, which is walking together. And it's hard to walk together when we don't talk with one another. We don't understand one another. We don't do it in healthy ways, which is what you've talked about. And so this is a discipleship podcast. And so TA, tell me a little bit about how all this relates to discipleship and how we can be greater disciples through kind of the work that you're doing. And when we get this right, what does this look like?
It's fun. It's joy filled. There's people. So I'll just tell you a quick story. Kind of the genesis of the leadership development journey here was about 11 years ago. I don't know where I heard it, but you just got to get together with people, Tim, beyond your staff, beyond your team, like just make a space for people to come together and learn. And so we started a 6 a.m. Not everybody should do this, but a 6 a.m. Sunday morning group. You can find your own time. This worked for me. And I got 8 to 10 men. Women could come, but it's guys that are exploring potentially being pastors in the future who have started to come, and we read 30 minutes in the Word and then 30 minutes of most often a theology book of some note. Right now we're walking through Chad Leakey's How the Light Shines Through. If you don't know, I'm going to have Chad on here on Lead Time soon, and it's such a great book, man. It really highlights a lot of the stuff we've talked about in this podcast. But we do that every single week, rinse and repeat. And I don't come prepared with much outside of we're going to read the Bible together and we're going to talk through a chapter or a section in a respective book. And that group, it's evolved over the years. People have kind of come and gone, but that's like a first experience of just being together, practicing. We're talking about practice, man, not a game. We're talking about practice. We got to practice talking the things of Jesus in a safe place. And the stories of leaders that have come out of that 6 a.m. group and what the Holy Spirit is doing through them to reach people with the gospel would blow your mind. So if you're a leader, just make space to invite people in to have Jesus conversations in a non-threatening, safe way, but be consistent, show up, right? And just wait and see what the Lord does as the Lord speaks. I thought there's so many, since we're talking pastors, men, because we don't ordain women in the LCMS, but there's so many men in our church that somewhere along the line, the Holy Spirit said, you could do that. It may not be a larger church like Azizi or Chris, you guys have led in and stuff, but you could set space to talk about Jesus in your family, in your home. And you have a theological mind, like you want to know more about that. And when we have a way for them to stay in context and continue to learn, like there's so many men that are raising their hands. We have about 15 students right now that are at some stage on their like theological formation, kind of dipping their toe into word and sacrament ministry. And it's just fun. And from a practical perspective, like I'm not at meetings. I'm not like, I'm not doing everything. I'm not preaching everywhere. Like it's a shared team perspective that goes way beyond paid staff to a lot of our co-vocational leaders. So it's just fun. I hope I'm answering your question, right?
Oh,
The
that's
culture
awesome.
is just, you've got to take it in. You just have to experience it because it's just such a different type of thing than I think a lot of our LCMS churches.
I think it's beautiful. And I think it's a really practical way collectively for a church to organize disciples into great leaders. I think that's sometimes, discipleship can be so challenging to practice personally and collectively, but this is more of a collective approach of, if there's something organized and something to invite them in, obviously as they're growing, as they're reading the word, as they're reading theological books, as they're under the care of pastors and other great leaders, like that is discipleship formation right there. And so I'd love to, more churches to be thinking about this and to be doing this. And then as we do this, I'd love to just challenge our denominational leaders to look at models like this and figure out how we can do this locally and train up and eventually ordain people localized or regionalized or online in a way that keeps our denomination moving forward. Otherwise, it's going to be I don't think it'll be a slow death. I think it'll be a quick death if we don't get on this quick. And that's my personal opinion. But thanks for all the work you're doing to move us forward. It is important. And I'm in your corner and anything I can do to support you. So, hey, man, we ask all of our guests to challenge our listeners. That we want this to be a practical podcast. So one thing that a listener can do this week, a challenge for them that would help them be a greater disciple of Jesus, what challenge would you issue?
That's good. Have at least one I see in you conversation around the power of encouragement. Like people, we grow up, but we don't necessarily grow up. People thrive on words of encouragement. Our team, our meetings, our staff retreats, all of that. And we go on overdrive to hunt the good stuff and to find the beautiful ways that God has hardwired this person, the contribution that they're bringing into our team, the gifts that we see that they don't necessarily see, the potential that we see in others. So to have one or more, hopefully more, I see new conversations and just watch that person light up and aim up and move forward with much more confidence and courage, trusting in the Lord. So that's the one challenge.
Beautiful. All right, listeners, you take that challenge on #RedLetterDisciple. We'd love to encourage you in that. Have that I see in you conversation. Chris, I see in you a game segment
That's
for
right.
Tim Alman here to close out.
Every person that's on the Red Letter Disciple gets a customized, curated game designed by our talented team of writers and interns here. They have whipped up an exceptional game. It's called, since we knew that we were going to talk about denominations, we're going to present to you a person, and we're going to see if you can put them in the right denomination. So that's what we're do. Okay.
This is funny.
Okay. So let's just say you got Mike over here. Mike is part of the largest Protestant denomination worldwide. Mike mentions to me it's just recently grown, especially in Asia and Africa, thanks to the mission endeavors. Mike says that he believes that in the baptism of the Holy Spirit, that is an event that happens or subsequent to conversion. And in a nutshell, I said, Mike, just tell me about your denomination. He goes, well, Chris, we really love the Holy Spirit here. Probably a little bit more than the other denominations.
Yeah.
What denomination?
Well, it's obviously some form of charismatic,
That's right.
but I don't know charismatic.
It's just generic. Yeah. Pentecostal, charismatic. That you're one for one. By the way, if you go 3 for 3, the prize today, I don't know if you know this, you'll receive 1,000 giving books to distribute amongst your.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Sweet.
We're going to send it out.
1,000.
Wow.
We're going to 1,000 and a $500 gift card to Red Letter Living. Brought to you by Red Letter Living.
All right. I'm locked in now.
All right. Let's see.
You better make them harder.
Here's
You better make them harder than that. Yeah.
I'm just going to give out the stuff for just
hey, we talked about
elementary games.
Elementary. All right. Okay. You want me to get harder? I'll get harder. Here we go. This denomination, which Chad is a part of over here, it gets its name from the Greek word for elder. And it's noteworthy for its unique organizational structure in which local congregations are governed by teams of elders who in turn are part of an overarching assembly of elders. The denomination is distinctive for holding a fully Calvinist system of doctrine. So in a nutshell, what he tells me, it's all about elders and Calvinism.
Wow. Chad, Chad just saved ZZ having to give me $500 because I'm even trying to pull the Greek word for elder and I'm failing epically right now. So tell me the denomination. I don't know. I
Presbyterians.
Oh, well, I thought you were like going super.
Oh, no.
I overthought that one. I totally overthought that one.
Listen, you can still play for Zach's iPhone. We will send you Zach's iPhone if you get this one right. Okay. And he'll leave all his contacts in there. It'll be great. Okay.
Okay.
Should I do that one? This group over here has a high sacramental theology. They perform infant baptisms and holds to specific understandings of justification. And they are separated into a more liberal group and a more conservative group.
The LCMS?
Yeah, that's right. You win.
Yeah.
You win the phone.
Yeah.
You win the phone.
Thank you.
You get it. You give me your
guys
address.
are awesome. This is fun, guys. Thank you.
Yeah, dude, I appreciate what you're doing. And I love, like I said before, I love the way that you approach it. And I think in our culture today, like when it gets to like political stuff, it's so divided. But I really like what you said. If we can't have conversations with people that we disagree with, then what the heck are we even doing? Like, we've got to start there and realize that we're part of the problem as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love it, man. Good job. Write a book.
Yes.
Come on.
It's coming out. I think there's something coming out. I'm actually in conversation with different publishers right now. The rough draft is done.
Awesome.
Confessing Jesus' mission kind of goes a need for confessional missional Lutheranism, a need for vision, a need for humility, and then a need for missional execution. So kind of goes from higher level down to the nuts and bolts of kind of leadership development, culture, and whatnot. So yeah, that's coming out hopefully sometime in 2025. But ZZ, you know how hard it is to get those things across the finish line. But thanks, Chris.
Yeah, Zach will print it for you.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, thanks, buddy.
If people want to connect with you, man, where can they find you?
UniteLeadership.org, and you could subscribe to Unite Leadership Collective on YouTube to track podcasts. So we just kind of made an adjustment. I had an American Reformation podcast. We changed it because people were just looking up my name. And so the Tim Alman podcast, a lot like looking to have conversations like you guys are having with people within and outside of our denomination to keep that learning going. Lead time is going to continue to be kind of news and notes, what's going on in the LCMS and various corners of our church body, and some more kind of practical podcasts there. So yeah, subscribe at YouTube, Unite Leadership Collective, and And then if you wanted to just hit me up, T Alman, TAHLMAN at cglchurch.org if you'd like to personally connect. This is fun, man.
Sweet, bro.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Keep on it, and we'll see each other real soon. All right, bud?
All right, love you, man. Yeah, thanks, Chris.
Love you too, bro.
See you, buddy.
Well, I loved having Tim on the Red Letter Disciple podcast today, and I love his heart. I think he's so right that we got to learn how to have healthy conflict and how to trust one another. And I'm really hopeful for the future of the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod, and believe we do need to make some changes. We all do, not just in our denomination, but in our personal lives, our churches, everywhere we got to make changes. And I hope we can truly get serious on figuring out how do we develop the next group of leaders and pastors. And so I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you want to further link in with Tim Alman and everything he's got going, we've got all the links at our show notes. We also have a link for our sponsor there, Hope Chest, so you can get in the Pastor's Vision Trip happening this spring break, March 24 to 29 in Guatemala. You can go to redletterpodcast.com and find all of those links there. That's right. We are rolling into season 8, and we got a really fun episode next week. We talk with Noah Herron. Noah listened to a Judah Smith sermon on YouTube that led him to give his life to Jesus, that led him to start a Bible study, that led him to a college ministry called The Gathering, which ended up reaching thousands of people and getting him going on a public speaking evangelism tour around the world. And a couple of years ago, actually just 15 months ago, planted a church in Nashville, Tennessee called Way Church that God is just doing powerful and incredible things through. So we're going to learn Noah's journey. He's going to give hope for us on how we can reach Gen Z, what habits we ought to have in our lives to be the greatest disciples of Jesus. And I can't wait for you to hear Noah in his incredible journey. You will not miss it if and only if you subscribe or follow, rate, and review. That way, automatically next week when it pops up, it'll show up on your feed. So we'll see you back next week for the Red Letter Disciple. God bless you.